Hi, Bruce, and welcome to Phenomenal Conversations. I'm glad I'm really going to be doing some in-depth conversation with you about core gifts. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to express to the reader or explain to the listener, as it were, what Phenomenal Conversations are and what their purpose is. So at the moment, I have two formats, Phenomenal Conversations. This is a new format that hasn't yet been publicly launched, which is one-on-one, and I'll be interviewing change makers that are living the change and really putting their ideals into action in the world to create systemic or other kinds of change. And I say that phenomenal conversations are important, particularly when we think about a collapsing world, that they foreground generative conversation, that they expand imagination, and they also ask profound questions. So that'll be the territory I'll be exploring with Bruce today. And there is a second format, which is online, in person, once a month, generally the last Tuesday of every month, 7 p.m. European time in the evening. And there I interview the change maker like we're doing now, but then we also have an in-person conversation with participants that jump in on the call. They go into small groups to explore some of the issues that we raise, and then we harvest what everybody discovered. And the interview is also uploaded and recorded, but at the moment, the general conversation isn't. So that's the overview and the picture. And once again, to thank Bruce so much for joining us. And I'd love to hear, of course, I know you a little bit. For people that don't know you, what led you to pioneer and share so passionately this phenomena of core gifts? What kind of drew you for that to become kind of a center point or center purpose of your life?
Well, there were a couple of things that happened that I didn't realize at the time had such a big impact on me, but I realized later. One is that I was really sick when I was 12 to 14 years old. I was in the hospital a bunch of times and had a lot of surgeries, and it was a serious enough illness that I didn't realize it, but I was asking myself the question, why is this worth it? Why go on? It was a tough enough spot I was in. And that question kind of never left me. Why is it worth it to go on? And it wasn't a sad question. It wasn't really an angry question. It was more of a wondering. It was a next generation of why is this happening to me? So I've carried that question my entire life, and it's come back many, many times. And the second thing that happened is that I've always been on the edge of things. I've always wanted to gather people around me and find people who were doing things in different ways. I had this immense curiosity about imagination. Yeah. And the more I read about life purpose and the importance of that, the more I started asking myself questions. And I could see a thread my whole life around trying to do things differently. And so I began to think about purpose in that way. And that led me, of course, to say, what's my wife's purpose? What's Dave Pendle's purpose? And so I started asking that question more and more. And then I ran into a friend on Vashon Island, where I live, who was working with young guys who were at serious forks in the road in their life. And I gathered with a group of older men who would get younger guys, and we'd find some camp to be at for a week or so. And spending time with those young guys changed my life, because I realized that they weren't very concerned about getting a job or going to college or reconnecting with their family, all those things that people are concerned about in their 20s. I could sense they were most concerned about the question, what am I supposed to be doing? Why am I in this world? That there was a yearning at that age, which we now know is a natural part of adult development, for people to fundamentally answer that question. And core gifts, the label we gave to that idea of life purpose, is one way to answer that question. And so there were really like, with anybody's life, there was a series of events that when you begin to pay attention to them, all of a sudden, you find yourself on an inquiry that can last a lifetime.
So we have a common background in working with youth. I think probably in America, the youth you work with probably had more profound problems than some that I work with in the UK, because we have a slightly better welfare system there. One of the ways that people pursue this question to find out who they are, as it were, is often to do like psychological testing or psychometric surveys, or look at various typologies and discover, who am I? As in response to that question, what am I to do? Knowing who I am to some degree helps. And what would you say that your core gift process does, or the core gift process does, the most common approaches to self-discovery do not, that are out there on the market, Myers-Briggs, etc. You probably know them, but what would you say that core gift offers that those common tools don't?
Yeah, there's a lot of those tools, and they can all be useful for understanding and healing and moving forward, but they don't answer the most essential question.
Okay.
And it's because of how they're designed. All those tools are designed. You do some kind of an inventory or assessment or interview, and you answer these questions. You choose between A, B, and C, and then all of them, that information is given to a central repository, and they compare you in their paradigm to thousands of other people who have done the same tool. And based on what you say, they say, oh, you're like that. And so the idea of a core gift is completely different than that, because those tools all say, how are you like other people?
Yeah.
And the idea of purpose is totally different. It's trying to answer the question, how are you absolutely unique? How are you unlike everyone else on the planet? Because when you get at that, you really can begin to understand what your path is.
Well, that's an interesting point, because there is a sort of, particularly in New Age circles or spiritual circles, there is a tendency to point to uniqueness as being significant, but often I think that isn't always understood it is a kind of understood in an egoic way than something that is truly supportive of a person's development. Well, how would you distinguish between those kind of notions of uniqueness and the uniqueness that you're getting at in helping people unearth their core gifts?
Right. Well, it goes back to that idea that there aren't many tools around that actually establish uniqueness.
Right. Okay.
I only know of a couple.
Okay.
The rest of the tools all answer the question, what are your patterns? How are you like others? And my friend Michael Mead likes to say, nature only makes originals.
Yeah.
A stalk of corn is not trying to be a river.
Yeah.
And so it can be helpful to see patterns and how you're like others. But the real purpose of life is to establish your uniqueness. And the reason for that is twofold. One, so you can figure out exactly what your contribution should be.
Right.
What can you do that no one else on earth can do in exactly the way you do it? That's the real contribution to make, along with a bunch of other stuff. But being able to make that unique contribution also enables you to heal in the way that you need to heal. We're really interested in, saving the planet and building community and all of the stuff that's so important in the regenerative movement. But one of the questions that doesn't look to me like it's an essential part yet is, how am I healing myself? And that has to be at least as important as healing the planet.
So I think that's an interesting paradox that you're bringing up there, and let's just dive into it. So there's something around, almost you could say we're born wounded, or we come up wounded through our childhood, or we've got specific challenges or limitations or circumstances that we think define us. So I'd love for you to unpack the kind of two sides of the same coin relationship between the kind of what you might call a core wound, or your kind of biggest challenge or limitation, and the development of a gift. How are they? How can they be in relationship with one another? They seem to be opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're just mirror sides of the same thing, of course, right? And so the idea of healing has buried in it this idea that you cannot heal simply through understanding. The idea in gifts is you can go to a therapist for 20 years and never heal.
Yeah.
That the healing actually happens when you gift the oppositional force of the wound into the world.
Right.
Like if my gift is around imagination, and that comes from a many but long and arduous stories around not being valued for my creativity, and told over and over again that it wasn't very useful, and you could stop doing that at any moment, Bruce. And so whenever I'm on this conversation with you and you're nodding your head, and that sends a message to me, you're interested in what I'm saying. So that story that started when I was 13, 55 years ago, I'm getting healed in the moment right now from giving this gift of imagination. You may think I suck at it, right? That's the deal with gifts. You may think I suck at it, but my psyche is saying, see, Bruce, this is what should have happened.
Yeah.
And whenever a person has that phenomenon happen to them, they heal.
Yeah.
And just, it's a little bit of a side note, but just let me say, one of the misunderstandings about gifts, which comes out of our love for strengths in the machine age, is that you have to be good at it for it to be valuable.
Yeah.
And the idea of gifts, there's no connection to competency at all. You can completely suck at it. Gifts are what you feel driven to give.
So,
and go ahead.
So then what is it then that's occurring if somebody, because normally we do try and like to be good at stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what maintains the impetus then if we're not as competent, or we don't get the reflection that we're good from expressing the gift? What's the counterintuitive drive that would enable a person to keep going despite the maybe not improving or not living up to one's own standards?
Well, first of all, if you believe it's your purpose, if you believe it's your core gift and you keep doing it, you will get better at it.
Okay, yeah.
We got to remember, in indigenous culture, this idea of purpose and path, usually not everywhere, I can't generalize it, but there's a common pattern of a person's main path being discovered as a part of a youth initiation process.
Yeah.
So a 14-year-old couldn't have been good at it. They were only 14 years old.
Yeah.
So there was an assumption when you or the group names your path, that it's a growing capacity in you over time, and there's an expectation that you're not going to be very good at it at the beginning, which introduced the necessity for mentoring in cultures.
Yeah.
And now we have an idea around mentoring that it's set up fundamentally as the haves helping the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
Modern mentoring is set up under a privilege model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're trying to get back to this idea that actually mentoring can only happen when your gift is speaking to my gift. That's genuine mentoring.
Yeah.
And so I will get better at it over time. And the compelling reason, if people keep saying, we don't want that, Bruce, we don't want that, Bruce, we don't, anybody who brings challenging notions into anything is going to get punished.
Yeah.
They're just going to get punished. But when you believe it's your path and you keep doing it, the antidote to being punished is self-love.
Okay.
Because you believe you're on the path you're supposed to be on, and nothing is going to stop you.
So there's a kind of category or a superseding interest in oneself, as it were, as a kind of love, as a love for
oneself. We're not talking about ego here. We're talking about a different kind of love.
Yeah, yeah.
Agape. We're talking about self-love here, the kind of deep love that where you realize I'm worth it.
Yeah. So you mentioned purpose in the beginning. I'd quite like to. Purpose is also a kind of buzzword in the alternative sector or in the purpose economy. Would you distinguish, because you were talking about core gift being an answer to what do I do? So how would you contrast your framing and encouragement and development of people's core gifts with the kind of mainstream notions of purpose? I mean, you mentioned them as almost identical, but would you distinguish that from what mainstream kind of encouragements towards purpose are, or are they not different?
Well, I think they're different in that most people think about purpose as passion.
Okay.
What do I really want to do?
Yeah.
What am I in love with doing? What would be fun for me to do?
Yeah.
And there's often an added dimension, which is good, of what would be useful in the world.
Yeah.
Right? What do I love to do? What am I good at? And what would be useful in the world?
Yeah.
You can have all three of those things in place and not be doing what you're meant to do in the world.
Yeah.
Because they're not attached to your unique purpose. We've lost this idea of unique purpose and we've turned it into passion.
Yeah.
And I think that's mainly because there's been a slow and steady attraction to strengths over time, which is, attached to the machine age. If you're working in a factory, Dave, I don't care what you think the purpose of your life is. Yeah. I want you to be able to pick up a screwdriver and screw on that headlight ring in a way that's efficient that the next person that does it. So
although those days are probably going to be behind us in a few years.
Your days with this, yeah, that's right. Now it's all happening by pushing a button and watching the electronic welder robot arm drop down and do it. Yeah. Don't date me, Dave.
Well, I'm a similar age, so
yeah,
dating myself as well. So another interesting notion that you mentioned earlier that I think is worth unpacking or exploring is that somehow the gift is discovered in the giving or the contribution you make. It's somehow almost only is it discovered in the acting rather than it's some latent passive potential that you can enjoy apart from the giving. So could you unpack that a little bit of it? You did say giving the opposite to the wound is your gift. So it sort of seems to be ingrained or embedded in playing an active role in the world and making a contribution from one's depths, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. So the old culture model is that well, the first thing is there's a fork in the road, Dave. At some point, every human has to decide whether they come into the world as basically blood and guts, and they are the result of all of their stories.
Yeah.
And the other choice is you don't come in the world just with blood and guts. You come into the world with something. You
Yeah.
know, people call it an essence. People call it, I call it a core gift. People come into the world, Michael Meade calls it a genius. You come into the world something other than just the physical, you know, parts of your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the point is to clarify and discover what that is. And many cultures have the idea that as long as things are going well, we don't have any interest in knowing that, what my purpose is.
Yeah.
Things are going along just fine, thanks. I don't need to muck around in my life at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the wound then in old cultures gets brought into the picture. And the idea is the wound causes the gift to be broken open and seen. It's the word for gift in many cultures go back to either spark or seed.
Right.
The wound is what causes the desperation in a human, the self-seeking that says, why am I in the world? And that results in the conversation. Let's figure out what that is.
Yeah.
And so that's a discernment process.
Yeah.
And you can name your gift. And many cultures had naming ceremonies. I heard someone talking about an initiation process in South Seas, where a man would lay in the bottom of a boat and discern what the sea was calling them to do. There's many patterns from around the world, but there's a discernment, and then once you know, then the idea is that the gift only comes alive, not through understanding, it comes alive at the moment of giving. And that's really the beautiful part, because that's how your community gets stronger.
Right.
It doesn't do any good sitting inside you.
Yeah.
So the model has, let's figure out my purpose. I'm going to heal doing that. And in the process of me healing, I'm going to make a unique contribution to my community and make it stronger. And the idea of strengths or the modern idea of purpose doesn't get at any of that.
Okay. So that's kind of like, I was just, as you were saying that, there's like almost a double meaning. The gift is yours, but it's always the giving that reinforces that it's yours. It's only in the giving of the gift that your sense this extra dimension of self-confidence comes in, because it's so core to who you are.
Yeah, it's so core to who you are. And don't forget, every time you give the gift, you heal.
Yeah, yeah.
So it amounts to this beautiful idea. The more I serve my community with my gift,
yeah,
the more I'm building my community and the more I'm healing. Because gifts have always had the idea of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons that when purpose is used, or even gifts are used, or discovering people's talents, to me, it often seems to be in a bubble about that person. And I think people get lost trying to find it because they're looking in the wrong place but for it, because everything is so solipsistic or related to the self apart from relationship and reciprocity. Somehow reciprocity and relationship are or this giving in relationship are kind of neutralized or not active in our culture.
Right. Yeah.
I'm wondering, for people that are listening that aren't familiar with your process, if you could describe a little bit about how you would go around helping somebody identifying their core gift, the process whereby you've designed and tested to also the core gift process seems unique, so that's a unique gift of yours. Not many people are unpacking it in this way. So it'd be nice for the listener, I think, to helping or assisting people find that for themselves?
That has a little bit to do with how the process was birthed originally. It was birthed by a group of organizations in Los Angeles who were working with people who had three things going on. They had what at that time was the unfortunate deficiency label of severe and persistent mental illness. They were living rough. They were living on the street, and they were doing some kind of substance. So in California, we've seen these are kind of the toughest of the tough people to engage.
Yeah.
And the standard kind of techniques weren't working.
Yeah.
And so we realized early on that we had to get at a seed of motivation that was bigger than, stopping drinking.
Yeah.
Or it was bigger than, going to your therapist every week. And so it was natural to think about life purpose. And so we started looking around, and we ran into two ideas that were really helpful. The first one was that whatever the idea of discovering life purpose is has to be available to everyone.
Right.
Has to be the common person tool. And so we knew the design had to be available to everyone.
Yeah.
And the second thing is the idea of gifts has in it that the more I probe deep inside you, Dave, the harder it is to see your gifts. That gifts are the most obvious parts of who you are. And of course, we live in an age of depth psychology, therapy, which sends the idea whatever's really important about Dave is deep inside and hard to figure out. And the idea of gifts is oppositional to that.
Yeah.
It's on the surface. So we started getting into the idea of patterns. And we said, so if that's true, could we ask a person, 20 or 30 questions? And out of that, could we consolidate patterns in their life? And then could we connect one of those 4 or 5 patterns, which comes out in the process, to a wounding experience in their life? And if we could do that, we would have the gift, we would have the wound, and we would have a way to help someone discern a unique life purpose. And so that's fundamentally what we did. It is people use the tool and they go, that's so simple.
Yeah.
And it's because gifts are supposed to be on the surface, easily seen. And so the process takes, an hour and a half or so. You've done it.
Yeah.
There's some initial questions, and then the person sorts through their answers to the questions and groups them together, and then begins to see, oh, there are 3 or 4 really common things I keep saying over and over again. Oh, and one of those is directly connected to the biggest challenge I've had in my life.
Yeah.
And so that becomes then the person's core gift, and the remaining themes, because they're repeated patterns of what a person does, becomes their strategies for giving that one central theme. So it's a very, very simple process. It started out with 84 questions. It took 4 hours. We used to blame people on the street for not wanting to hang with us long enough to find their life. I mean, it was so awful when we first started, but it's 30 years later now.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about the tool is never gotten a grant, never had universities get invested in it. It is a community built tool from people who care about purpose and are out actually doing the work.
Yeah.
And they have formulated this tool, and it has continually shape-shifted in different ways to get more and more and more precise.
Well, that actually reminds me of something I think is interesting, and maybe we'll end with this, but the discovery of what it is, or one's own formulation of the core gift, that's not the end of the process. Could you elaborate on how this evolves and grows for a person over time? So, because we tend to think that, okay, I've given it these words, or this is what it is, it's fixed for all time. But how does this grow? How does that inner essence or capacity grow over time as one gives it attention and acts it out?
Well, thanks for asking that. It's a great question. it goes back to this modern idea of assessments. Like if you do an assessment, it's a one and done thing. This is who you are.
Yeah.
And the core gift process is not one and done. I have from 1990 until I just did it again a couple of weeks ago, I have 20 of them in a row in a document.
Yeah.
I can see my growth over time.
Yeah.
The deal is the essence has not changed at all.
Right.
But the language changes as I get older, I get wiser, I use my gift in different ways. So it's a growth tool, not a set in stone tool. And that's really the value of it, because I can see in my life, every time I do it, when I look at my core gift statement, I can see the growth that I've had since the last time I do it. I can also see what my current challenges are.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of continual unfolding process, which is what the gift is supposed to be.
And actually that's sort of true learning in a way, because of by constant, I'd say not anxious reappraisal, but constant review and reflection is what helps us grow. Genuine learning, I'd say authentic learning helps us grow in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I don't, it's important, Dave, sometimes when we're talking about gifts and I'm talking about gifts, people get the idea that I don't like strength tools, or I think the core gift tool is better in some way. And I'm not saying that at all. All of the awareness tools are really useful.
Yeah.
It's just, they don't do this unique identity thing, which is so much a yearning in Dave Pendle's psyche to know. And your community wants that from you. And so we're trying to get at something that's connected to your uniqueness, so you can go out and serve the world and heal.
I love that. That's a great note to end upon. So I'm going to turn the recording off right there and then.